Good afternoon and welcome to the HL7 Da Vinci Community Roundtable. Today's session is Exploring Inferno, an overview, demo, and benefits of Da Vinci-related test kits. My name is Alex Goss, and it is my pleasure to moderate today's Community Roundtable and to remind all of us that we engage in these forums under HL7's antitrust policies to ensure appropriate collaboration and information sharing. It's great to have you on today's webinar. We kick off our session with key program updates before our main event, an informative session dedicated to enhancing your understanding of the Inferno Health API testing framework, its test kits, and their applications. Our presenters will introduce the Inferno Framework and voluntary test kits available for the health IT community. These voluntary Inferno test kits may be used as testing tools to further advance implementation guide development and testing of industry implementations. Our expectation is that after today's session, you'll know how to use the Inferno test kits and their benefits, have a better understanding of testing your APIs against the Inferno Da Vinci Project test kits, including coverage requirements discovery and documentation templates and rules, and that you'll also know where to find the Inferno resources available for your testing use. It's my pleasure to host today Scott Bohan, Information Technology Specialist from ASTP, and Carl Naden from MITRE. They'll be supported by Johnny Bender and Robert Scanlon in our Q&A session. We will have time for questions after our program updates and our panel. Please use the feature. Oops, sorry about that, folks. Please use the Q&A box throughout today's session to post your questions as we go. We will be holding the questions for the ASTP and MITRE team until after their presentation. We will be posting the recording of today's slides, so you'll be able to access those slides as well as the recording. And please be sure to complete the survey that launches at the conclusion of the webinar or whenever you choose to leave to give us feedback as it helps us in the future. Regarding our Community Roundtable schedule, due to the holidays, we are going to be merging our November and December Community Roundtables. We are combining Da Vinci governance meetings of the Operating Committee and Member Forum with our Community Roundtable into one meeting that we'll be holding December 11th at 4 p.m. Eastern. We anticipate resuming our regular cadence of fourth Wednesdays in the 2025 calendar year. So be sure to know that we will not be meeting in November, but we will have a fantastic year-end wrap-up and showcasing the 2025 plans for the Da Vinci community at our December 11th Community Roundtable. I'd like to highlight some industry events and HL7 events that are coming up. There's the AHIMA 24 conference in Salt Lake City next week. The NCQA Health Innovation Summit, October 31st to November 1st in Nashville. ASTP is holding their annual meeting December 4th and 5th in Washington, D.C. On the HL7 event side, we will be having a Fast Security Testing Day event that'll be held as a virtual-only event. It's slated currently for January 13th. More details will be coming out, although we expect that to be a stable date at this point, because it will be the day before our virtual-only HL7 Connect-a-thon, which will be held January 14th to the 16th in 2025. And unfortunately, we do need to make an update to our entries for next year because we have not made that mental pivot to 2025. But we will fix those before we post the slides and hope that you will keep in mind that all of these HL7 events are for the coming year and that we'll have the virtual testing day and Connect-a-thon 2-day event the 13th through the 16th of 2025. And that we will have the January working group meeting, which will also be virtual, but will be held 2 weeks later, January 27th to the 30th. I wanted to highlight our member slide for a moment because I'd like to showcase the addition of ASTP to the Da Vinci membership, reflecting their addition to a permanent seat on Da Vinci's steering committee, akin to how HL7 and and CMS hold permanent seats on our governance structure in the steering committee. We're thrilled to have Avinash Shanbag filling ASTP's designated seat, and also Matt Ron, who's sitting on the operating committee. If you'd like to learn more about Da Vinci's governance structure and related membership opportunities, please reach out to me or to the Da Vinci PMO at POCP.com mailbox. There are also additional slides on membership and my contact information at the end of this slide deck that we'll be posting. I'd like to talk about our 2024 program priorities, and you've likely seen this slide a number of times as I've discussed it throughout the year, and I'd like to offer a few key updates to showcase some progress that we've made and communicate current trajectory. On the postable remit front, our newest use case, the September Connectathon testing event, exercised this use case, validating the implementation guide features. We plan to ballot the specification in January based upon the success that we accomplished in September. In response to ASTP's HTI2 proposed rule, I wanted to give you an update on some work that we've done across our implementation guides. We assessed the impact of US Core 7.0 adoption on the Da Vinci implementation guides. This is akin to what we had communicated to you previously related to HTI1's upgrade to US Core 6.1.0. We did this assessment on the HTI2 proposed rules upgrade to 7.0, and we found that there were not a lot of disconnects or any challenges in incorporating updates into our implementation guides, with the thought process that we would be able to provide an easier glide path to developers as they plan for the trajectory over the next couple of years, since there was a lot of commonality across the current US Core 3.1.1 to 6.1.0 and to 7.0.0. However, there are a few changes that we did need to make, and we are balloting related changes currently and doing necessary STU updates. And I'll talk about those momentarily. I'm going to go to the next slide and talk about our use case and IG readiness to give you some of those updates. A foundational asset is the HREX implementation guide, and we've balloted that for STU 1.1 in September with publication dates in November, early December. For PDEX, we've balloted that also in September for version STU 2.1, and we're reconciling that feedback during the weekly calls. We're targeting publication of the STU update for PDEX formulary and for PlanNet by the end of 2024, which will follow our HREX update since there's some interplay. On the burden reduction front, we are planning STU updates for both coverage requirements discovery, documentation, templates and rules, as well as prior authorization support. And the review cycle for all 3 implementation guides has been completed. And so we'll be reconciling that feedback process and targeting publication after HREX has published. Other STU updates that we'll publish once HREX is finalized includes clinical data exchange, member attribution, and notifications. One of the items on our 2024 program priorities involved the CQL Questionnaire Support Project. We had launched this project back in July with public-facing calls and continue to advance efforts to identify supportive implementation materials. Although that is not an implementation guide necessarily, it's not listed on this slide. It is just part of our program project priorities to help implementers, along with other implementer resources. And I'll talk about those in a moment. In regards to patient cost transparency, they're actively focused on STU2 ballot reconciliation. And for risk adjustment, they're targeting publication of version STU2 by the end of 2024. As you can see, our use case teams have a lot of work in flight and are continuing to mature our implementation guides based upon real-world experiences and implementer feedback. As you're traversing your efforts, it may be helpful for us to highlight several resources that you can leverage and participate in. On the right-hand side, on quick links, we have the Da Vinci in Action Interactive, which is a way for anyone in industry implementing our implementation guides to showcase the work that they're doing and include some contact information, as it is a helpful resource for folks to tap into a training partner exchange effort. And by folks posting on Da Vinci in Action Interactive, we can help the community better connect. Also on quick links is our Birds of a Feather, which we update 3 times a year, corresponding to the working group meetings with HL7. And so after each of those working group meetings, we ensure that the latest Birds of a Feather, the master overview deck about our implementation guides, is posted to quick links. On the left-hand side, you'll see that we have the Da Vinci calendar and implementation guide dashboard. Those have some subs pages, which can be helpful to implementers in understanding how to get up to speed with the Da Vinci implementations, and also to find under the calendar our video presentations. And then in the center, you'll notice that we have industry statements and updates. That's where we post our industry policy letters and response letters, as we did for the HTI2 letter that we just submitted. I mentioned a moment ago that I wanted to talk more about some implementer resources and supports. One of those that we're currently undertaking is with the Trebuchet FHIR pilots. This is a public-facing, anybody can participate activity. There is a Confluence space that we have linked here, and they're focused on prior authorization and CDEX use cases initially, and they're working on uncovering real-world blockers and defining underpinning processes to help piloters get up and running. We're working towards creating a playbook resource to further help industry with their adoption in real-world production status of the Da Vinci implementation guides. Similarly, we would like to undertake a patient cost transparency pilot, and we are reaching out and soliciting interested participants, and you can reach out to Michelle Galliotto at POCP.com if you are so interested. I do want to see if there are any questions. I know I went through that very quickly. Apologize for getting a little tongue-tied at one point, but my goal is to provide as much time to the ASTP and MITRE team so that we can get a demonstration, overview of all the resources, and then have a robust Q&A session with you at the end. I'm not seeing any Q&A coming in. However, that doesn't mean you don't have time to submit them later, and I'd be glad to address them when we get to the final Q&A session, which will be held after we hear from our esteemed panelists today. At this point, I would like to invite Scott Bohan to come on and audio and advance me through his slides as he gives you an introduction to Inferno.
All right, thank you. This is Scott Bohan from the ASTP ONC Tools and Testing branch, and I just want to note that, again, this presentation is focused on the series of voluntary Inferno test kits released to enhance the interoperability of health IT and facilitate advancement of FHIR implementation guides. And in particular, we will be focusing on Inferno testing for the PlanNet and coverage requirements discovery implementation guides. Next slide, please. Before we go into the specifics of those test kits, however, I want to establish some context around FHIR testing. So on this slide is one way to think about FHIR testing and illustrating some of the pieces of the testing workflow. So on the left-hand side is where we start with the requirements, and the requirements overall come from the intended use case, and in a technical sense, usually from the FHIR implementation guides, or IGs for short. And these IGs contain the specifications that a system needs to conform to. And then next, we have the conformance artifacts that serve as a benchmark or reference point. And these artifacts can include things like a reference server, which is an implementation of the requirements. And this server can be a reference point for other systems as well, trying to meet conformance to the IG requirements. Additionally, there can also be reference data. A reference server is usually populated with reference data, which is data conformant to the IG. And then third are the conformance tests, which are used by a testing tool to show a system's conformance to an IG. And a testing tool, such as an Inferno test kit, may contain all of these testing artifacts. And while a testing tool may not cover every possible test case, they can test common pathways and scenarios to provide a general idea of a system's conformance to the set requirements. So next slide, please. All right, so having provided some context around testing in general for FHIR, now going into a little bit around the key points I want to highlight around Inferno. So first, Inferno is an open source tool for creating conformance tests for the FHIR standard. Inferno is capable of supporting tests for a variety of use cases, one of which is the ONC certification program. Inferno provides the testing infrastructure for the official certification program testing tool for the G10 standardized API for patient and population services certification criterion. The G10 criterion defines requirements for a single patient API and multi-patient API according to the FHIR standard, implementation guides, and other standards. And Inferno provides support for testing the single patient API and multi-patient API defined by that criterion. In addition to supporting the ONC certification program in an official capacity, Inferno is also a platform for general FHIR testing. Inferno can be used by health IT developers in their software development cycles to help verify their implementation's conformance to FHIR. Inferno also facilitates the advancement of implementation guides, where IG authors can use Inferno to verify implementations of the IG in practice, such as through testing of reference implementations. And there are many Inferno test kits supporting FHIR IGs, such as US Core, Bulk Data Access, Smart App Launch, and many more. Inferno is also designed to be flexible in how users interact with it. It supports a graphical user interface for manual testing, as well as an API for programmatic automated testing. And then finally, Inferno is transparent and open source. So this means that the Inferno framework source code is available online, benefits from community review and feedback, and includes the documentation necessary to be adapted for other use cases by the community. Next slide, please. So going into more detail, the heart of Inferno is the Inferno framework. And the Inferno framework is a collection of capabilities that enables writing tests for the FHIR standard, as well as other standards and specifications. And there's two main components of the framework that I want to highlight. So first is that Inferno is powered by a programming language tailored specifically to make authoring FHIR tests easier. And this is referred to as the Inferno domain-specific language. And this language reduces the burden of writing tests and maintaining that testing infrastructure. And then second is that Inferno tests are designed to be accessible. And I mentioned earlier, but the Inferno framework enables many ways of interacting with the testing environment, with each interface suitable for different use cases. So there's a web interface that can be viewed with a browser, and there's also API and command line interfaces which can help with automated or test authoring workflows. And I'll also note that both of these capabilities and more are enabled by use of the Ruby programming language, and using Ruby empowers Inferno with all the capabilities and flexibilities that are provided by a fully featured programming language. Next slide. Okay, so Inferno framework enables writing tests. However, tests are only one component that is involved in FHIR testing. Comprehensive FHIR IG testing may include use of FHIR profile and terminology validation. It could also include use of reference servers, clients and data, and a number of other different types of services and reference implementations may be involved. And to account for this, Inferno's testing approach is to package specific testing use cases essentially into test kits. And Inferno test kits are a collection of the tests and facilitating services and utilities used to test a specific use case. So, for example, consider the test kit used for the ONC certification program for the G10 criterion. That test kit involves profile validation, terminology validation services alongside other API tests as part of testing that single patient and multi-patient API that's required by that criterion. A reference server is also available to provide an example of what a conformance server could look like. And another useful feature for Inferno test kits is that they can be deployed locally or online. And ASTP ONC hosts an instance of Inferno with many test kits available on inferno.healthit.gov. Next slide, please. So many Inferno test kits are currently available. And to illustrate this point, this slide shows some of the test kits that are available online. Additionally, the Inferno test kit registry has more information and additional test kits listed. So there's many test kits available there. And then on the next slide, we'll turn towards the primary focus of this presentation, which is the collection of Da Vinci-related test kits that are available. And so these test kits can be downloaded locally again via GitHub or used online at inferno.healthit.gov. And this presentation will be focusing on the PlanNet and Coverage Requirements Discovery or CRD test kits. And then next slide, please. And before I turn it over to the MITRE team, I just want to list some resources that are available to learn more about Inferno. First, I'll highlight that a primary resource about learning more about Inferno is inferno.healthit.gov. And this is where you can see additional documentation as well as access test kits online for testing. And then additionally, if you're interested in learning more around the Inferno source code, there are organizations available on GitHub, the ONC organization, as well as Inferno Framework GitHub organizations that contain Inferno test kit source code if you're interested in seeing that. And with that, I will turn it over to the MITRE team.
Great, thank you, Scott. And let me get my screen up here. All right, good afternoon. My name is Carl Naden, and I'm serving as the tech lead for Inferno test kit development. Over the past year and a half, I've been helping to design and build many of our Da Vinci IG test kits, including those for DTR, PASS, PDEX, and PlanNet. And I'm really excited to be here to show you how you can use some of these test kits. Just want to mention that also with me is Rob Scanlon, who is the Inferno project lead, and he'll help me answer questions during Q&A at the end of the talk. All right, since Scott has already kind of given us an overview of Inferno, I'm going to jump right into a demo of two of our Da Vinci IG test kits, the PlanNet server tests and the CRD client tests. Once you've seen some of these working tests, I'll highlight some key aspects of how we've designed Test Inferno and what they mean for how to prepare to use them and kind of expectations and what you should bring if you want to run these tests. And I'll finish up by running through in just a little bit more detail each of our Da Vinci test kits and provide a high-level overview of what you can expect from each. All right, let's start with a PlanNet server test suite demo. So just to level set on the use case that this is targeting, the PlanNet IG defines a FHIR-based API for payer provider directories, including ways that you can access and expose insurance plans and the organizations, providers, and services covered by them. It defines a read-only API that payers expose and applications access. For example, the PlanNet API could enable a patient-facing tool that allows them to compare different insurance plans, for example, based on whether a particular physician is covered by each plan. And there is a Da Vinci reference implementation for a PlanNet client and a server that I'm going to show here to show what's going on. So, for example, if I open up and connect this to the PlanNet reference implementation server, that will allow me to go to this provider interface. And it's thinking here. If it doesn't come up in a minute, oh, there it goes. And I can search for providers. So let's say that I'm currently using the persona of Connecticut's, and I have a primary care physician, Dr. Krieger, and I can see that that doctor is covered by my current plan, but I could do something like change this to another plan by Green Circle, another fake payer, and do this search again, and it will think here a second. And so far it hasn't updated, but when it updates, it would show, there we go, that Dr. Krieger, there are some other Kriegers that are covered, but my primary care physician that I want to keep isn't there. So that's just a really brief example of the types of things that you could do with PlanNet. Now, by using this reference implementation, this is a client that's connecting to the server, and you can actually see up here at the top, this reference implementation is providing the gory details of the actual technical query that is happening. And so we've demonstrated in this way that the reference implementation, this client is able to communicate with that particular server. But if we wanted to be more rigorous and more complete and make sure that the server was able to respond to the full set of requests that are specified in the IG, we would want to use a more robust tool, and that's something that Inferno can provide. So, as Scott said, we have ASTP ONC hosts on inferno.healthit.gov a collection of test kits. And from this homepage, I can click on this Start Testing Now button. And there are a lot of test kits here now. I can filter them down using tags, including we have a Da Vinci tag that will get you to just the list of the Da Vinci test kits. So I'm going to select the Da Vinci PlanNet test kit, and that brings me to a homepage specific to this test kit. And in general, the test kits are focused on particular IGs. So this one is focused on PlanNet, and the page has a little bit of information about when that test kit was updated and its maturity level. All of these Da Vinci test kits are currently marked as low maturity, as we're still adding more requirement coverage and making sure that they're helpful and designed well. This particular, we have other information here on this page about what version of the IG is tested, some of the details on the scope, as well as known limitations. From this page, you can jump into a test session. So I'll click Create Test Session. And this brings up the test suite interface where I can start testing. So there's lots of tests here on the left-hand side. You can see the full list of groups that we have. And actually underneath these, there are a significant number of specific tests that are happening. We have a lot of documentation about these tests where Inferno is going to be reaching out and looking for examples on the server of certain profiles and resource types. So in this case, the insurance plan tests. So I'm going to focus on these. So once I've kind of selected which set of tests I want to run, I will need to provide some the details, tell Inferno what to do. In particular, on these server tests, where Inferno is going to be simulating clients, I'm going to need to tell it a FHIR endpoint to connect to, and if there are access requirements, what an access token is that would be allowed to let me let Inferno access that server. To make this easier, in cases where we have known reference implementations, we have presets. So I can select this Da Vinci PDEX PlanNet reference server. And now when I click Run Tests, some of these details, including that reference implementation URL, has been filled in here. And this is, in fact, that same URL that the client was connected to. So now when I'm ready, I can click the Submit button, and this bar down in the lower right tells you that Inferno is interacting with that server and making queries in this case, and getting and checking that the results it gets back are what are expected. When I ran this at a group level failed, but if we look down here, we get more information about the specifics of what passed and what failed. And you can see here that in this case, many of the tests, the specific tests that we ran, passed. In general, we are doing things like finding instances of insurance plans on the server, trying to read from them, and then searching using specific parameters. We can, within these, you can see this little icon indicates that they are associated with a request. And you can see here that as a part of this test, Inferno made a request. And actually, this is a query string, very much like the query string that we saw here in that reference implementation. But unlike the reference implementation, which is making specific queries that are directed by the user, here Inferno is making a whole lot of queries and testing to make sure that all of the different types of queries the server is able to respond to. If we scroll down a little bit farther, we can find some things that Inferno found that it either wasn't able to verify or saw that were actually wrong. The first example here is a skip. This little red slash indicates that Inferno didn't have enough information or wasn't able to find enough information to perform the verification. So the server may meet the requirements, but it isn't able to verify that. And here in this case with the red X, saying that there was an error, in fact, specifically that insurance plan resources that were returned in some cases didn't conform to the requirements in the PlanNet IG. And if I click on this, I can get details on the messages, and looks like there is a code that was used that the HL7 validator that Inferno uses to check these instances for conformance thinks is not correct. Want to emphasize that, as Scott said, these are tools to help implementers and IG authors and people that are creating these systems to improve their artifacts, both the reference implementation and the IG, and help us include, we are still working to improve these tests. So I haven't looked in detail at kind of what this error is related to, but the fact that there is an error is an indication that likely on one of those areas, whether it's Inferno's implementation of these tests or the IG itself or the reference implementations approach to the implementing the IG, one of those there's a problem, and that kind of the fact that we have an error here is an opportunity to improve the overall ecosystem. All right, so that is just kind of a high-level overview of an initial or one particular Inferno test. Next, I want to go and do another demo of a slightly more complex set of tests that involves a little bit more interaction from the tester. So we're going to do this in the context of the coverage requirements discovery IG and its workflow. At high level, the coverage requirements discovery workflow involves allowing a provider who is proposing or ordering treatment for a patient to send that order and information about it to the payer so that they can provide kind of in-the-moment feedback and guidance to that provider about whether or not that procedure is going to be covered and or whether it needs some prior authorization documentation. The idea is that again it's quick synchronous response so that the treating provider can continue to work right in their workflow. The Da Vinci team also has a reference implementation for this. And it has, again, both a client and a server. And you have to imagine this is kind of separated from a full EHR, but you can imagine a provider going in and selecting, for example, to order a respiratory assist device for young William Oster here. And they can then submit that to CRD, and what comes back is a set of cards, what are called cards, that get displayed to that provider so that they can take any next steps based on what the payer is telling them. In this case, it is indicating that documentation is required in order for this to be covered, and it provides an option for actually filling out that documentation by launching DTR, and that kind of comes up with this questionnaire, which is a whole another set of IGs and tests that we have, but that I'm not going to go into detail right now. Again, having this reference implementation is very helpful because we can see kind of how that workflow works in practice and see particular instances of a client communicating with a server and kind of doing what we would expect. But if we want to be more rigorous and kind of check not only that this client can communicate with the particular server that it's configured to connect to, but can kind of meets the general requirements of the IG, we can use a tool like Inferno. So I'll pop back into Inferno and I'll create a new session. I'll filter down to Da Vinci again, and this time I'm going to select the Da Vinci Coverage Requirements Discovery Test Kit. And in this case, on the right-hand side here, I actually have multiple options because unlike PlanNet, where we only have server tests for CRD, we have both client and server tests. And so I'm able to select here, I'm going to select the client tests, and Smart version is something you can change, but we're going to use 1.0 for here. So we'll start a test session, and CRD is a quite general IG, and there are lots of things that it allows servers and clients to do, but that it doesn't necessarily require them to do. In particular, there are many different hooks which correspond to specific places within a provider's workflow where payer information might be valuable, such as appointment book and order select, order sign, and things like that. But certain client applications only need to implement the hooks that are relevant to their workflows. So for our purposes, we're going to select and test just the order sign hook, which is what the CRD request generator implements. And similarly to the last time, I'm going to select a preset because we have a preset to allow Inferno to work and test the CRD request generator reference implementation that's hosted. And now I'll click Run Tests. And again, details have been populated here. I'm going to make one small requirement or change to the configuration so it doesn't return a coverage information card. And I'll click Submit. And one of the things that you'll immediately notice is that whereas when I click Submit for the PlanNet tests, Inferno just went off and executed and did everything on its own. Now, with these client tests, Inferno is asking the user to interact with it. So this is a wait dialog, and it's asking the tester to invoke the order sign hook and send requests to this location, and that Inferno will process the requests and return CRD cards if successful. So this is a key difference between server tests, which the Inferno team has done a lot of work on, and we have the G10 certification tests that work in that mode, and these newer client-side tests that we've started to get in with the burden reduction and other Da Vinci workflows, where the tester is going to need to do some interaction with Inferno. So I'm going to pull out some information here to configure the CRD request generator to, instead of communicating with the Da Vinci reference implementation, to communicate with Inferno. And there are instructions if you want to do this yourself within the test kit documentation. I'm going to update that REST endpoint. And now when I click Submit to CRD and display cards, you can see that the what got returned changed. And instead of coming from that reference implementation, you can see that the source here is listed as Inferno. So I've completed that first step that Inferno asked me to do to send those their hook requests. And so now I'll click here to continue, and that tells Inferno to keep going and do the other checks that it is doing to make sure that those the behavior of that system, the CRD request generator, is conformant. And now at the end here, I get another wait dialog. In this case, it's asking for an attestation. Inferno sent back cards, but and the client under test displayed them, but Inferno doesn't have a way to kind of inspect that that display of the cards and verify it mechanically. So in this and other similar situations, Inferno asks for an attestation, just says that asks the tester to click whether or not a statement is true. And here they're testing that the external reference and instruction response types were returned and displayed. So I can go back to my CRD request generator and see that, yes, I got external reference card and an instructions card. And both were displayed, and that looks good. So I can go back to here and click that attest that that is did succeed. And similarly, with PlanNet, there are some things that Inferno is flagging as potentially non-conformant with the reference implementation. But as I said, we haven't looked kind of carefully at these, but we see these as opportunities to improve, again, at either one of those, the IG, the reference implementation, or Inferno, because it's possible that there are problems or inconsistencies in one or multiple of them. I do want to now pop back to my slides just to unpack a little bit what happened in this demo in particular and give you a framework that I think is helpful for thinking about and kind of preparing to use Inferno tests. I think you can think of this as having really two parts of the execution. First, an interaction step where the CRD request generator communicated with Inferno simulation of a CRD server, and a second where Inferno is checking and verifying that the information it gathered during that interaction meets the requirements of the IG. And so in this case, during that interaction step, Inferno or the CRD request generator invoked the Inferno test suite's CDS hooks endpoint, and then Inferno simulated a CRD service and returned cards in response. And then the request generator reacted to those returned cards and displayed them on the screen. So that's kind of that interaction phase. And then there was a check step where Inferno verified the request generator's behavior, including some mechanical checks on the hook invocation to make sure it met requirements, as well as those the attestation that you saw in cases where Inferno couldn't make that mechanical check. I think this is a helpful kind of general model of having an interact step and a check step. And the details of what happens in each of these steps will vary depending on the IG. And in some cases, they may be mixed together and kind of repeated over the course of the execution. But Inferno is always doing these two things. It's always interacting with the tested system or otherwise gathering information from the tester and then checking that information to make sure that it is conformant. Just to kind of map it onto the PlanNet tests that we saw earlier, PlanNet was doing a bunch of requests. Each of those requests was kind of that interaction with the server that then Inferno was checking to make sure that the results that got returned by the server kind of met the requirements. So why do I highlight this? It's because while this kind of verification step is the focus, and obviously that's kind of that's the answer that we want to end up getting. Does the system conform to the IG? But there's a lot of importance in the simulation as well, because that's where there can and we think needs to be flexibility so that the tester can help Inferno interact with the tested system in a way that allows that system to demonstrate its capabilities. So the tester may need to support the interaction with Inferno not only by configuring the system under test and interacting, clicking buttons in its UI like we did just now, but it may also need to provide information that allows it to interact with Inferno. So what's a concrete example of this? Well, at the Connectathon in this last September, we worked with an EMR vendor to test both the CRD and DTR workflows together, and they had specific requirements for CRD cards that launched DTR, and the cards that Inferno returned didn't support that. So we needed some way to to support their ability to continue the workflow beyond just just CRD. And so to support that and avoid them needing to build or configure their system in a certain way to do that, the CRD client test actually allows the tester to specify the cards that get returned by Inferno. So I'm going to show you how that looks here. If I go back to my tests and run tests again, I can provide a custom response for the order sign hook request. And what I'm going to do is I just pulled out the specific technical details of the response that the reference server provided and have pasted in here. So now after Inferno is waiting for a request, I can go back here and click submit to CRD and display cards. And now I have that, that original card, but instead of coming from the reference server, it's coming from Inferno. And now I can kind of continue that workflow, and that again allows for further testing. Want to emphasize a few other examples where this is the case. Things like use cases where matching is happening inside a system, like a patient or on ordered procedures. By allowing testers to provide these kind of simulation inputs, they can direct Inferno to use data that will result in a match so that testers don't have to set up particular patients or other entities in their system, as this adds burden and complexity to getting testing running. It does mean that testers may need to bring requests or responses or other details, other technical details for Inferno to use in addition to the system that they want to test. And that's the main thing I want to emphasize here, is that when you test with Inferno, there may be situations where you need to bring some of those kind of requests or other details to help Inferno simulation so that it can allow the system under test to demonstrate its capabilities. And when we walk through the list of Da Vinci IG suites here in just a minute, I will kind of give a high-level overview of places where the tester will need to provide that kind of information. Lastly, I want to note that on the verification side, when testers provide inputs, and I'll just finish clicking through this really quickly. In this way, we do have Inferno check that the information provided is itself conformance. Here you can see this first test is checking that custom CDS service response is valid. And we do that just to make sure that the full interaction, both what the system under test is doing and the part that Inferno is playing, is fully conformant, and so that this is a valid test. All right. So that was, again, a demo of two quite different Inferno tests that we have implemented. Now I want to finish up with a survey of the tests and the Da Vinci test kits that we have available in the frame of whether they have reference implementation presets that you can use, and also what information you would need to bring if you wanted to run these against your own system, what additional kind of simulation inputs you'll need to provide. So first, just a review of what is in each of these Da Vinci test kits. Each of them is built around a particular IG, and they have one or more test suites, each of which is a executable set of tests that can be run individually or in groups. We mostly did groups in this, executed groups of tests in this case, but in some cases you can run individual things. The test suites each target a single actor or role defined in an implementation guide. And the tester has a lot of control over which tests in the suite are applicable and they want to run. Additionally, we have documentation about the scope and purpose of the tests, how to use the tests and current limitations. Again, since all of these are still low maturity and developing, we want to be clear about what the tests do and what they don't do yet. And we have a set of presets to run against known reference implementations. And the test kits also come with a pre-configured FHIR resource validator so that you can that it uses to validate instances and that can also be accessed externally. And to emphasize some of the design priorities that we had when creating these tests, a big one is avoiding placing artificial constraints on the systems under tests. And that was, again, a big driver for us to allow these kind of simulation inputs that allow Inferno to work with the system under test rather than making the tester set up or configure the system to work with Inferno's data or particular needs. We try and make testing as easy as possible by minimal setup and configuration. Obviously, there still are many inputs that need to be provided to get all of the coordination and setup, but we do our best to keep those as minimal as possible and allow for fast execution. And then we seek high data requirement coverage. We don't look just at the IG, but we also look at the things that are references and underlying specifications to make sure that at the data API and authorization and workflow levels, we're testing requirements across all of those. All right, so quickly want to go through the different test kits that we have. First is CRD, and you saw a demo of our CRD client suite. And that had an optional hook response test simulation inputs. For other parts of the test kits, we do some testing of the FHIR API, including update tests. And for updates, we ask the tester to provide details on an update to make so that since Inferno won't know what resources, what existing patients or otherwise are on the system. So that's an input that if you're going to test those, the tester would need to bring. As you saw, we have a reference implementation preset for that one. The CRD server suites is the other side of CRD. And here, the tester will need to bring request bodies for the hooks since, again, Inferno won't know, the particular procedures or business rules on the server side that's being tested that will elicit certain responses, certain cards to come back. So we ask that testers bring that rather than trying to make them respond to certain requests that Inferno has built in. And we do have a preset for running that against the CRD server reference implementation. Next is DTR, and I forgot to mention CRD and DTR both are using are testing the 2.0.1 version of the IG, which was released, I believe, last October. For DTR, there are 4 different actors. We have suites for 3 of them, including the Smart App suite, where there are some options around simulation for the tester to provide context and specific resources that Inferno will serve for them to use to drive their logic. And then we have a full AHR suite, which is kind of a similar one to the Smart App suite, just a subset of those functionalities where there actually aren't any simulation inputs needed. Neither of these have presets for the reference implementation available right now. We are still working to get them working with the reference implementations that are posted. Then there are 2 server actors, the payer server that's responsible for returning questionnaires. Here, again, Inferno doesn't know what specific requests are going to elicit questionnaires from the payer system. So we ask that testers bring the request that will return those. And there is we don't have a reference implementation. We do have presets for running this against the Smart App Suite. We don't yet have a test kit for the light EHR actor, but that is in the works. So next is the prior authorization support test kits, where the system is actually submitting documentation to support a prior authorization request. And we have two suites here, a server suite, where to simulate Inferno does need the tester to provide, submit, and inquire requests. Again, because that payer that's under test is going to be set up in a certain way, and we want the tester to tell Inferno what is a request that will elicit a accept or a deny response, rather than asking the tester to set up their system in a certain way. We do have a preset that runs against the past reference implementation there. Now, on the client suite side, we asked the tester to provide deny and append responses, since in the 2.0.1 version of this IG, we didn't have those in their technically X12 proprietary details. So we let the tester provide those details. Next is PDEX, the provider data exchange test kits, which has a few different use cases. We are specifically currently testing the payer-to-payer exchange approach, both on the server side and the client side. We have suites for those. For a server, the tester needs to bring patient IDs that Inferno can query for, and member match requests that will fail in certain ways, since we won't know exactly how to match or how to create those ourselves. And there is a preset for the PDEX RI. And then on the client side, there aren't any simulation inputs, and we don't currently have a reference implementation preset. But we are very interested in finding partners to try this suite out, as it's a pretty new and experimental one. So if you're interested, don't hesitate to reach out. Then just two more is the PDEX PlanNet test kit that you saw demoed, targets the 1.1.0 version of the IG. And as you saw, you don't have to provide any simulation inputs, but in cases where you want to guide Inferno towards particular instances on your server, you can provide that information. And we do have a reference implementation preset. And then lastly, the PDEX formulary test kit, or US drug formulary, against the 2.0.1 version of the IG. Doesn't require very many simulation inputs. It is able to kind of find the resources it wants to access, except for locations. So the tester needs to provide particular locations to look at. And we do have a preset for the formulary reference implementation. So that's a whirlwind tour of our Da Vinci test kits. Lastly, just want to list a few additional test kits that are related and relevant to Da Vinci use cases, including the Smart App Launch test kit, for which we have some server tests, the UDAP Security test kit, which is relatively new, was released this fall, for which we have server tests. Also, the subscription spot R5 backport IG, we have both client and server tests. Again, that was released earlier this fall. And then we have server tests for the Karen for Blue Book, and the bulk data access, both for servers. So those are all relevant to PDEX use cases. And lastly, just wanted to highlight the same resources that that Scott put up about where you can find resources to help you as you use Inferno and learn about its capabilities. So with that, I will pass it back over to Alex for the QA.
Hi, thank you very much for that. I'm going to share my screen so that we can share the Q&A box so folks can submit their additional questions. I do have some questions that I'm going to kick us off with. I think this session overall is a lot of details to absorb. It's really great to see that Inferno is such a robust test tool at this point, and to see it's more than just the Da Vinci community. We are also seeing IGs from our sister accelerators such as FAST and Karen Alliance, when I noted that you have the UDAP and the Blue Button implementation guides. And so I have a couple questions. There were some notes related or comments related to future development work. And so I thought it would be helpful if we could talk a little bit about the Inferno ecosystem and understanding that this is an open source, freely available resource being provided on behalf of or thanks to our federal government. And so wondering about some of the ongoing support plans, because it sounds like folks could really dive in deeply with using the Inferno scripts, and wondering how the Inferno is going to keep pace with the implementation guides as they continue to evolve and are balloted, some being pointed to in regulation and others not. So could somebody from either ASTP or MITRE talk about how Inferno plans to keep pace with the implementation guide evolution? I'm not sure who would like to take that question. And if anybody's talking, you're on mute. Scott, would you be able to possibly address some of that question?
Sure. Yeah, I think so. As far as keeping pace with IGs, I think that first we're trying to get a baseline for what exists currently. So I know we're a lot of these test kits were released recently, or we're still very much in the early days of establishing these tests. As Carl noted, a lot of these test kits are, we list them as low maturity because we're still looking for getting a lot of feedback from implementers. So I think currently the focus is getting implementers to, engage with the current test kits, get some feedback for that, and potentially move forward with test kits, having seen some feedback from implementers.
That's great. It sounds like it's a relatively new work product, and we all need to apply our lessons learned, which leads me into the second question, which is how, as you're learning from these test kit usages, what is the ASTP and MITRE approach to feeding lessons learned possibly back into either connectathons efforts or implementation guides to help improve the implementation specifications?
So I can just add a comment initially. So when we release the test kits, we try to engage with the IG authors and the work groups that help support the test kits to get their initial impressions and feedback, just around our initial release, and then engaging in other testing activities like connectathons are always helpful for getting the implementer feedback, and then just engaging with the community as far as potential improvements. As Carl mentioned in his demonstration of for the PlanNet test kit, potentially identified potential things to look into as far as the reference implementation or the Inferno implementation of the conformance tests. So when reference implementations come up, or when implementers look at our tests and run them against their servers or clients, the feedback that's generated there can help inform like the entire ecosystem, like Carl was mentioning.
Yeah, and this is Johnny Bender from ASTP ONC. Also just wanted to speak to our past experience with developing test kits for like the US Core implementation guide early on, when US Core was still relatively immature. We identified several issues after implementing tests in Inferno, and we're able to engage with the developer community on Zulip to give that feedback, submit Jira tickets, get things corrected, and I don't know, really see a testing tool as a way to facilitate engagement with like an implementation guide and like making it real, and then identifying issues and having that sort of iterative feedback loop. So
Yeah, also note too that sometimes we'll get good engagement in the GitHub repository. So we can sometimes get feedback submitted through there, where somebody may identify a test that could be improved, or something that was potentially overlooked, or things of that nature. So engagement through the GitHub repository for these test kits is one channel where we've also seen some engagement that's helpful for improving testing.
yeah, both the GitHub issues and then also pull requests. I think we might have had some pull requests in the past. MITRE team, correct me if I'm wrong on that, but yeah, love whatever engagement we can get.
Well, it sounds like you're really trying to make sure that you're working with the implementation guide leads and the use case teams. You're going to connectathons, you're leveraging Zulip and GitHub. It also sounds like you're leveraging the reference implementations that Da Vinci has been investing in through either contracted resources, or more recently, we're using a model where our members are helping to build those reference implementation guides, reference implementations, and make that software starter pack available to the industry. And so it sounds like you've really tried to come in and link across a number of the components within the HL7 ecosystem and the Da Vinci implementation efforts, which is great.
Also just mention that they're kind of through our experience with implementing these tests, we did submit tickets for improving the IGs themselves, mostly focused on clarification, since we're trying to have kind of very clear ties between what we test and requirements within the IGs. Kind of that clarity is very important to us, and we spend a lot of time looking at these IGs and kind of have, we think, valuable feedback to provide on where the IGs can be more clear. And hopefully that improves and makes it easier for implementers as well as they start to implement these.
Thank you. That's a really good call out. Not only that you're using Jira, but that there is a good life cycle bringing us all full circle. And Brianna, I saw you were going to come off mute. And as I started chatting, would you like to offer anything on this?
Oh, no, I don't think I came off mute, but if I did, that was an accident.
Okay, no worries. Just wanted to be sure I didn't cut you off. So one of the things that I'm struggling with is how does, oh, I just got a question. Oh, I actually have a recognition that's come in. Thanks so very much from one of our burden reduction implementation guide leads, acknowledging the MITRE involvement in the implementation guide development for burden reduction has been greatly appreciated. So the community has felt your presence and involvement, and it's always nice to give some good feedback that way. There were some timelines, some future development activities that were noted as Carl walked us through that very well-paced and in-depth overview. So do you have anticipated releases that industry should be monitoring and looking out for that related to those future work plans? Everybody seems to have a cycle of when they will deploy upgrades. Sometimes it's very fluid, and sometimes it's more on a scheduled cadence. So for our attendees today, it would be great to understand the trajectory of the Inferno development and when we should maybe be expecting some things, or what we should be doing, what we should be monitoring as far as future enhancements, additional test kits, and capabilities.
I think 2 points I think that Carl had mentioned. One was around the DTR. I think that was one point where currently there is not testing. And then remind me again, Carl, of which actor was not currently tested. But I think we're potentially looking into tests for that actor, and including such tests in the test kit. So I don't have a release date for that, but that's one potential feature enhancement for the DTR workflow that could be coming up.
Yeah, I mean, Inferno has monthly release cycles, and we are at this time continually updating. We're not, I would say, making progress on all of these test kits at once, but we are, we have a roadmap for updating certain areas, and as a part of our involvement in connectathons, we have kind of targets of areas that we would like to focus on next. So we don't have kind of a clear release schedule, but certainly the light DTR actor is one that we want to get out there and test for that, since that's an area that we've seen people at connectathons have systems, and so we're interested in giving that one a try. And another area that's, as I mentioned, we are kind of interested in trying and developing further is the approach to testing the client side of these kind of data access APIs that you see for example, the CRD server is able to access data on the EHR side. The DTR Smart App has the same kind of set of requirements, and there's a question for us about how to test and kind of what expectations are going to be. Do the IGs really place on clients in terms of, or are those actors that are accessing that data in terms of things like the coverage of certain, like the ability to use certain search parameters? So that's an area that we hope to bring some ideas to future connectathons, probably starting in the January one, and is an area that we are very interested in kind of feedback as to whether the approach that we bring there makes sense and kind of meets the needs of the community.
One of the opportunities that the Da Vinci membership advances is its capacity to bring its architectures, resources together as sort of a member-led think tank discussion group. And so I would extend to you the opportunity, if you're looking for feedback and opportunities to engage and get into some details and iterate, build out opportunities. That's something I would imagine that the architecture group might be interested in hosting a discussion. And I think I see one of their co-leads has been on today's call as well. So if that's of interest, please let me know. And we can certainly make arrangements because I do know that this all takes a village. It's a very complex ecosystem, especially when you start getting into medical policy rules, real-time data display, and support of that patient and provider interactions at the point of care, because we know when we get that good data there, it actually leads to better follow through and support of the patient care. So this today has been fantastic. We have wrapped up our questions from our audience. We do welcome you to follow up with us at the Da Vinci Project. My information is included at the end of the slide deck, as well as some additional resources that you may have find of interest, and look forward to continuing to have you at our future roundtable. And just as a friendly reminder, our next community roundtable will be December 11th at 4 p.m. and it will be a year-end wrap-up as well as a preview of our 2025 work efforts and priorities based upon our members' recent feedback and influence into our strategic planning for the coming year. And with that, I wish you all a great balance of the rest of your day and look forward to seeing you at the December 11th session.